Okay, we are here once again today with Deep Prasad, quantum physicist, CEO of ReactiveQ, and more recently, Vice President of Technology at UAP Expeditions. Thank you for joining us again, Deep.
Thank you. I'm happy to be on.
Okay, last time you were here, we talked about your company, quantum computing, all of the wild news coming out of the American government about UFOs or UAPs, as they like to call them, as well as certain metamaterials of unknown origin that could potentially revolutionize human technology. Today, however, I wanted to chat with you about this new venture that you're involved in, UAP Expeditions. And I don't want to put words in your mouth or get any of this wrong, so please tell us in your own words, what is UAP Expeditions? Who are you working with, and what is it you hope to do?
Sure. First of all, I appreciate that, giving us a chance to clarify. So to put it very succinctly, we are essentially a organization, a scientific organization dedicated to answering the question of whether we're alone in the universe or not. So we are searching for extraterrestrial technosignatures, essentially. So just to break down what a techno signature means to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So techno signatures in this case is we're looking for signs of technology being used somewhere in a different civilization. So normally what SETI would do is they would look for techno signatures outside, right? So a radio signal incoming from Andromeda that is, mathematical. Let's say it's beaming the prime numbers. That's a techno signature, technically, because it's not like it's an artificial signature. There's no way, nature would just randomly spit out prime numbers. I mean,
Right.
there's a small probability, but yeah. So another techno signature would be, does this planet that we're observing, with a telescope, does this planet have signs of pollution? Like pollution from using gas, because that would be one techno signature as well. So what we did kind of agree on unanimously is that there are techno signatures in our skies based on the military reports by trained witnesses that we've talked at length about before, and so we believe that that might answer whether we're not alone, and in order to do that, the best way to do it is just to do hardcore field science. There's no other way around it.
Now, you mentioned some of the witnesses. You are working with at least one, if not more, of those witnesses, right? And are you free to say who that is?
Yeah, definitely. I can say some of them. For example, we have Sean Cahill, Kevin Day, we have Gary Burris, and I believe Jason Turner. So we have at least these four guys who were all present during the Tic Tac events while it was being tracked. Not just for that one day, right? And so I think that's fascinating.
Now, looking at bodies far away in the universe, SETI's been doing that. We've had some great programs going from NASA making observations about very curious things far away. But in this case, we're more, if I understand it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're more looking at some of the more terrestrial things that have been showing up that you and I discussed in the past. What specifically are you looking for? And more importantly, where are you looking, and what sort of equipment and technologies are you using to try to make these observations?
Yeah, those are all good questions. So essentially, first of all, I'll start with where we're looking and what we're looking for. So what we're looking for is this Tic Tac, right? Like, or any UAP that matches the 5 observables that the AA-10 Pentagon program came out with. So you have the anti-gravity, hypersonic. We can go over those later, but there's a very set criteria. And the bottom line about these criteria is that each one literally represents incredible advancements, decades, if not potentially centuries, of advancement in a field of science, just one of them alone. And so what AATIP is claiming is that one common trait amongst all these UAPs is that they have 5 of these all in common. So what we're looking for is exactly those kinds of vehicles and technologies to see if that's real or it's kind of it could be a hoax, right? People are claiming that they could be susceptible to being tricked by a black project or a black department. So there's ways to determine the truth, and we hope to do that. So what we're going to do is go to Catalina Islands. Catalina Islands is a hotspot. It was also one of the last locations of one of these kinds of UAPs. And so what we want to do is, we know that it's kind of like a recurring pattern. What we want to do is track it the same way that you would have tracked or studied great white sharks.
That I'm really glad you mentioned that specific area, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but you're talking to somebody who is an old squid. I was a U.S. Navy veteran who worked in carrier battle groups back in the 80s out of San Diego, and that area from Catalina down to off the coast of Mexico, that's a military training area. So I guess my next question for you is, not for nothing, but does the military get a little nervous when non-military people start peering this closely at what's going on where they're doing all of their generally classified training, where I used to go and train with carrier battle groups? Because back then they would get a little nervous.
Yeah, and I can imagine they might be getting a little bit nervous now too. But we have so many military connections, in the sense that we have a lot of former military guys, people connected, currently in former intel, and so we are coordinating this with them. We don't want to surprise anybody. For example, we're looking to every single permit that's applicable to us, whether it's for the boat, whether it's for like technologies. For example, one of the things that Commander Fravor ran into was, like, he claimed that the Tic Tac applied radar jamming, and so we would love to work with anti-jamming technologies, right? And like technologies that look for radar jammers instead. But however, the problem is that for us to experiment with radar jammers, some grades of radar jammers, you might know this, are illegal, right? Civilians can't use them.
For civilians, yes, nothing's illegal for the military.
No, yeah, not at all. And so we have to play within those constraints. And but yeah, we're trying to be wary. But yeah, that's a great cognizant question.
Just to be clear, and we touched on this last time you and I spoke. These are observations, right? I mean, you're not planning on finding some way to shoot down one of these objects or try to force it to the ground or get a hold of it, or this is just observing, right?
Yes, this is we do not plan on offending anybody or any object, whether manned or unmanned. So ideally, like, unless we're completely forced to, and we can't, in the case of a real UAP, you can't even defend yourself anyways if it becomes hostile. So other than that, yeah, like, why even?
No, I've actually written about that myself and said what a horrible idea it would be to try to shoot one of these things down, because if they can maneuver that much better than us, how much better might their weapons be? And one would assume they might have some defensive capability.
Absolutely. And if you're to take the Italians seriously on their claims, right? The Italian version of Luis Elizondo and parties, they're saying that some of these UAPs will fire back. They almost claim that they all do, or to some extent, like they retaliate if you shoot at
them. I have never heard this. Do you have one example you could toss out for the audience? Because you're going into areas that I have not covered yet.
Yeah, so I'll have to look up the exact name of the case, but there are cases in Russia where there are claims that people, fired openly on a UAP, and the UAP vaporized them. Like they actually no, they I don't know if petrify is the right word. They basically turn them into stone, which is interesting. So yeah, or like it wasn't actual stone.
Holy cow, I do not spend enough time researching this. I have never heard this. I will go look it up
sure.
For a follow-up.
I'll send you the relevant resources.
Thank you very much. Okay, assuming that you're smarter than that and you're not going to try to shoot them down.
No, we won't.
Here's one part that I don't understand yet, and I hope you can help us with this. If you recorded more sightings and shared them with the public, let's say, I think that would be great. It would go a long way towards getting more people to buy in and realize this is something very real and
Right.
something that needs to be explored. But aside from that, if all you're doing is making observations, radar observations, satellite video, and watching what they do, um, aside from proving that something is flying around, can we gain any insight into the technology
I
that we're
love that
seeing
question. Yeah.
just by observing them?
Yes, absolutely. But there's more we can do that goes beyond observing while not attacking them. Downright shooting them down or trying to capture them. So for example, one example is like let's say we observe the kind of propulsion technology that's, for example, we're bringing neutron detectors. That's a really good example. So neutron detectors.
Could you please tell us what a neutron detector is for the people less scientifically, you know, knowledgeable than you and I? No,
Yeah.
not that I know what a neutron detector is, but
All good. All good. So a neutron detector, as you can imagine, detects neutrons, and neutrons show up in both nuclear fission and nuclear fusion reactions. So they can show up and be used as part of the chain reaction in nuclear explosion, for example, or if you're trying to create energy. So when you detect these neutrons, it tells you, in theory, what kind of energy source is being used or what kind of reactions, what kind of chemical reactions might be going on. And so this will give us insight, right, into the propulsion. If they are using nuclear fusion, we should be able to pick up on it. Neutron detectors are also used for detecting dark matter. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting field, but you can build very cheap ones for like $30 up to millions of dollars. So yeah, we're going to be bringing one of the ones that are on the cheaper end, but they work. Like they have, been tested out in the lab before, in the sense that they do what they should be doing as a detector. They haven't detected dark matter or dark energy, but yeah.
in preparing some research for this interview, I found an old quote from Carl Sagan from a talk that he gave, and this was going back to the 70s, where he said that humankind has had the scientific community uh, in humankind, I'm paraphrasing here, um, has expressed a lack of interest in things they think are impossible until they see something that makes it look possible, and then we suddenly figure out a way to do it. Do you think that could apply here? Like, we never thought we could defy gravity other than in science fiction for the most part. If we see something defying gravity as a scientist, do you, even if we don't get a hold of one of them, do you think that spurs the research and maybe now that we know it's possible, we're just going to figure out how to do it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. It's one might argue that it's optimistic, but I could argue it's not. I think as it's within the realm of physics, we can do anything. We can build whatever we want. And now that we're learning that our physics itself is kind of incomplete, even more than we ever dreamed before, even more than before, Einstein died. Like it's the gap is so much bigger than any of the greats ever could have imagined it to be. So yeah, given that though, we can still make a lot of jumps. We can do things. We are kind of forcing ourselves. You're right. Like I would have never considered chasing anti-gravity, but now I totally am. That is something I'm open to replicating in the lab because I think it is possible. And it's just a matter of time until somebody in the white world, figures it out.
Um, I promise all of our listeners who are reading or are listening to this
Right.
that I did not prompt you with that, but you just set up one of the other questions that I had queued up and I want to ask
Oh,
you. Aside from, I mean, we've seen some amazing things in some of these videos, the testimony from the Navy pilots and other people. Aside from anti-gravity and maybe even inertial dampening, I've been reading some folks from the scientific community, not just Reddit or whatever, suggesting that these vehicles that we're seeing, craft, whatever you want to call them, they travel in ways that mean that they might be doing something that's previously not understood in terms of how we view the three dimensions that we observe our universe in. That they might be crossing dimensions or doing something that we don't even know. One of the best examples cited is how the Tic Tac could drop 28,000 feet in under a second without producing a massive string of sonic booms.
Yeah.
Is that something that current science, in your understanding, even conceives as being possible?
No, no, absolutely not. Especially in the case of the 28,000 feet, because you have something that it first starts from 80,000 feet, right, down to 28,000 feet, and then it drops again to 50 feet, which means, and he said it was instantaneous, which it has to be at least extremely quick, right? So it went from here to here. That breaks the conservation of energy laws, and those are the sacred ones. Those are the ones that people will, physicists and scientists will make fun of you if you break them, because it's like saying that, oh, I built a perpetual energy machine. This will give me infinite energy. Don't ask how it works. It just works. No one has ever actually built one. It's everybody has. It's just it because, and also on top of that, our most fundamental law says that it's impossible. Yet here you have these machines, the Tic Tac, that breaks that conservation of energy, because the linear momentum and the momentum in general is not conserved at the speed that it's going. It shouldn't be able to instantaneously stop, is what I'm saying. Like, it should at least spend some time deaccelerating, and it doesn't. That's so strange. And obviously, there's no wings as well, which just makes it even weirder, and no sonic boom, as you mentioned. So there's so many things that our physics would say, yeah, that shouldn't be possible. It might be from a quantum mechanics sense, but we haven't figured out a way to describe the world perfectly, the classical world that we see, right, in the quantum mechanics perspective. So we couldn't just say that and then leave it at that. You'd have to prove it. Yeah.
Okay. We're getting close to, I don't want to take up your entire day.
No, it's all good.
I want to just tee up a couple of questions, just two, pretty much, that might be getting, if you're uncomfortable with them, let me know. A little off the fringe, perhaps, but observing all this and putting it in the perspective that some people who are more perhaps science fiction or philosophical have thought about in the past. As a scientist, do you think it's possible that the universe is far more complex than what humankind, what we biologically are able to observe with our senses in the three dimensions that we're used to? And maybe there's a huge gap that perhaps, and we'll go ahead and say it, maybe some other species with different senses, that we're missing big pieces of the very fundamental, I don't even know the right words, the fundamental way that physics works, the fundamental way the universe is built. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I worry all the time, probably every day, that we'll never, it's a fundamental limit. Like, we will never know every single answer to every question we pose. It's just impossible, period. Which is annoying, right? Because a lot of us, like, for example, I'm super obsessed with, understanding nature better and better, and it's just a never-ending task, which is also a good thing.
Well, you just mentioned your obsession, and that was the other thing I wanted to ask you. You're somebody who came up in the University of Toronto. You were described by your own college as possibly being the next Einstein. You've gone into quantum mechanics, and you were doing quantum computing, and we would expect somebody like you to be buried in a lab somewhere, just building the next computer that's going to be able to calculate the total number of grains of sand on the planet in under 3 seconds. And you've obviously made a lot of ground in that. This is a little bit far afield from where you started.
Mhm.
What got you so interested? Is it just the possibilities of the technology?
No, not at all. I think I've actually come to realize, and I kind of always thought about it. The technology was the least interesting part to me whenever I thought about this idea. Like, the idea of not being the only intelligent species in the universe. Because up until, like, I would say even 21 or 22, it was very deep set in my mind that this is it. Like, there's absolutely no way that we're alone in the. I mean, we aren't. Like I thought this is it. Like this is the rest of my life. I'm going to focus on quantum computing, and this is like my life. I had predicted everything, or like I thought I knew exactly how things would go. But it's just not. It's not the case. And what drove me was the idea that like it's a fundamental. It touches on the fundamental problem of why anything exists at all, right? That's the biggest question about in life, in my opinion, is
Like
how
the Big
is
Bang, or I mean, why is there a universe?
why is this even happening? Like there's absolutely it was never owed to us. Nothingness. It should be the minimum. It should there. You can never just put random stuff into a system, right? Something can't just come from nothing. No matter how many mental gymnastics we pull and try to mask it away in equations and philosophy, it's a paradox, and that we don't have an answer for that. And so to meet other races who are experiencing the same problem as us, the same paradox, who are also part of this weird game called reality. That's so exciting, and the technology is what technology and philosophy, I believe, is what shares and what kind of bridges us. But everything else is probably quite alien. That's just my guess.
Wow, I that sounds something I want to make a joke about, because what you're addressing really is
Yeah.
one of the fundamental precepts of basically every religion in the history of humanity is, why is there anything? Where did it all come from? There is one alternate theory, and I'm going to make this the last one, and I'll let you go, Deep, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
This is something that's been brought up, and it's not a joke. It's been brought up by some serious thinkers. And I'm just going to toss it out to you. Is, in your opinion, there any chance that none of this is real and we're living in a simulation that someone else built? This is a theory that's been out there. Have you considered it? And do you think it's possible that I'm not even really talking to you, that I'm just experiencing a simulation?
So, yeah, I would say that I've accepted it, and now I'm kind of like trying to look at beyond that, like what's next, right? Because and I'll give you my argument for it before we go. Like, I'd love to explain to you this quantum physics experiment. It's because it's something that I'm working on now in real life as well. I want to extend.
Awesome.
Thanks. So yeah, step one is replicating it, and then yeah, we want to. Anyways, I'll tell you the experiment. So the experiment was done recently, was published, and it's an extension of Wigner's friend's paradox. So the Wigner's friend paradox is essentially the idea that because the wave function of each observer is different, the whatever these observers will observe over time will also be different. Right? It's a very simple statement, but the implications are very profound. So I'll give you an example. Me and you, we're looking at each other over the screen right now. Now, let's say that you had a box sitting on your lap that I can't see, and I had a box sitting on my lap that I can't see. And between them, your box has a entangled photon, and I have an entangled photon. And so we have actually pairs of these entangled photons.
That's
And
the
so
spooky at a distance thing that Einstein talked about. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. So it's and the way that you make them, right, is you start with one photon, or you start with well, in real life you can use something called a spontaneous parametric down converter. And these SPDCs, what they'll do is they'll split laser light, and then every now and then 1 in 1 million particles, you'll have an entangled pair of photons. Their spins can't be described, for example, without each other. So you can use these two partners and put them anywhere in the universe, and their spin will be, aligned and instantaneously correlated, which should be impossible. That's what Einstein, right, like said should be not possible. So let's say we've done that, because we really can do that in real life now. Like we've proven that really is a real phenomena. Um,
Well, the Chinese did that, right? With the satellite, they actually had an entangled pair.
yeah, they absolutely did. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Which is impressive because they did it in space, right? I mean, that's
Right.
so far. That's really far to move 2 qubits or, well, yeah, photons. And so yeah, and so here's the beauty of this setup. When the second one of us makes a measurement, we collapse the wave function, right? So all that means is that the photon will have to, in this case, pick either up or down as a spin that we're going to measure it in. Normally it's horizontal, vertical, but yeah, so up and down in this case. And so in theory, you and I should get the same results because we split the same exact particle in half, let's just say. Um, a priori. So it would be the same as, let's say in the classical world, forget particles to make it a little bit simpler. Take a basketball. We take a green basketball and we cut it in half, and you get half the basketball, and I get the other half. And we put our halves in a box so we can't see our halves. Now, here's what happens in real life with particles. It's so weird. You open your box, and there's a chance that you will see a red half of that basketball instead. And I will see like a green. And over time, we'll have a mismatch in how many times we observed different colors in our box. So let's say the box like gives you a 50-50 chance of observing red or green. Same with me. Over time, we will have different results, even though we started with the exact same physical basketball, the same physical green basketball. So,
Okay.
so yeah, you can imagine why that's weird, right? And yeah, what do you think so far? Do you have any questions?
Oh,
'Cause I'm gonna
you've
try.
already lost me. I think you've lost most of the audience, but I still there are going to be some people who will understand it, and I will be able to go look it up. So please finish.
Beauty. Okay, sure. Okay, sure. So now we have these entangled. Let's say we'll stick with the basketball examples. So
Sure.
you should have kept the green half, and I had the green half, the other green half. And now every time we open the box, the colors will change, right? Green or red for both of us. And we write down our results. In real life with photons, we do the same thing. It's either spin up or spin down. The problem, like I said, is that in real life, if we had the same object, if we share the same objective reality, we should have measured the same results the whole way through. Every time you open your box, because you were sharing your half with mine, mine should have always added up with yours, right? If you measured a red half, I should have always measured a red half, but I never, like, that doesn't happen. There becomes this mismatch, and it's as if I'm in a completely different reality than yours. So let's say I called you up and I said, "Hey, what is the color of your ball?" And you said red. If I opened mine, I would have, first of all, no way of checking what color yours is, but it wouldn't align with what I think yours should be. Like if I measure green in mine, then in my world, yours is green no matter what. But you're telling me on the phone that it's red, and it's only because we haven't directly observed each other's boxes. So
This
yeah,
sounds a lot like Schrodinger's cat, but
yeah, extended. It absolutely is. It's an extension of the Schrodinger's cat experiment.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to go read more about this. I've learned more about science doing research, being able to even try to talk to you than I did in
That's
my
awesome.
entire time in school. I'm going to skip the last question I had for you, which was about relativity and the speed of light, because that would probably take forever. So let's just go ahead and thank you for being here with us. Please let everybody know, where can they find more information about your new UAP expeditions and anything else with you online, on social media? Because I do want people to follow you. I have learned so much from you,
Thanks, Chad.
and I'm only just scratching the surface. I'm like a dog waiting for a treat on a very high table. So where can
Wait,
people
you
learn more
understand?
about your
So,
new outfit?
for now, you can either follow my personal Twitter, which is Deep Neuron, so DeepNeuron, or you can follow Expedition UAP, so Expedition and then capital UAP. That's our Twitter tag for our SETI organization. So yeah, and we also have a LinkedIn page that we post on for that as well. So
fantastic. We will put all that in the show notes for the interview, and I thank you again. Is there anything coming up that you would like people to know about?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say there is. So one thing that I wanted to say is that we do plan on creating a public outsourced data set. It's obviously been tried before in the past. And the thing that we're trying to make different is that we want to open it up to scientists and anyone really that who can do their own analytics. The benefit here is that basically if somebody pollutes the data set and lies, they ruin it for everyone. And so they themselves can't leverage the possible insight they could have gotten from that data. So ideally, you see what I mean? The motivation there would keep everyone honest, or at least that's a hope. So that's something that we, ideally want people to look out for in the future. It's going to be, if you think about CERN, right? Like you're familiar with the Large Hadron Collider.
Yes, I am.
So right on. So yeah, of course. Okay, so with CERN, here's a fun fact about them. They generate more data in just 1 hour than all of Facebook does in a year with all of its,
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, it's a ton of data. I know. It's a huge amount. And so they have a huge group of citizen scientists. Like I was part of it. The first one I attended was at 16, and I loved it. Like they had these Atlas master classes at UBC, which were these scientists would fly in from CERN and just show you how to use their software and real life data sets, like what they work with. And so we would kind of do something similar. Like we could have these UAP analytic classes, master classes, so to speak. We could open source the data because that's how they ended up finding the Higgs boson. At the end of the day, they open sourced the data. They had it, and they also had a huge scientific collaboration. It was just massive, and they're a nonprofit. So, yeah.
All right. Well, look forward to that. When something else big breaks, please let me know. I will certainly promote it. And in the future, if you ever want to come back and speak to our audience, you are always welcome, Deep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Have a nice day.
You too, sir.